I would say in general, cultural mapping is the attempt at collecting, analyzing, and then representing cultural resources in any given community. But again, you can already see how each of this notion is very debatable and open to different interpretations, because what is a cultural resource, for example, is really a matter of definition, and we may have very different notion of that.
Cultural mapping for me, I suppose I put the emphasis on the cultural, because for me, cultural mapping is what it's not is a cartographic technique. It's a method to enable you to uncover social relations, to get at the cultural, and to find a way of showing it. In particular, thinking about culture in spaces, the spaces that people inhabit. So uncovering those social and cultural relations in a social space, and seeing the different dimensions there are, the different layers.
Cultural mapping gives you the opportunity of representing on a bidimensional space things that are lost when the people that do them are lost. Crafts and skills like dances or know-hows, specific know-hows. So I think that cultural mapping can be seen as a way to humanize geography, to make it more liberal, more open, more progressive to what life is. Because if you think about it, life is made up so much more of intangible than tangible, or at least I like to think so.
I think it focuses you on the detail, the nitty-gritty of people's lives within particular spaces.
I think we have to understand that you can pursue very different objectives when you do cultural mapping, and generally speaking, broadly speaking, I call these different objectives identity effect and knowledge effect. As in, you can pursue engagement of the community, and you can pursue a better engagement of the community in appropriation of its own cultural identity. And in other instances, you might be pursuing the building of knowledge that in turn you might use for other purposes. So the knowledge you produce then becomes an input to other projects.
It can be a way of envisaging the future. It can be a way of envisaging different kinds of futures, and it can bring together past, present and future in one document. That's the beauty of a visual language as well. I think that's another difference from the way that I work as an anthropologist, or have been used to working as an anthropologist. We work with narratives and texts which tend to be very unilinear, but a map works with a visual language which is not linear, which can go in all kinds of different directions, which can be added to, which escapes an overall, or can escape an overall authorial control.
Cultural mapping is very interesting when it comes down to intangible resources, intangible culture resources. Because people actually were engaged in this activity. They helped us produce the map. And so you can imagine that it is a completely different feeling going to a presentation of an urban plan and knowing that some of the maps that you see were actually produced, you actually produced them, and you and your fellows produced them, than just going and seeing some maps produced by who knows who. New technologies have helped us understand how dynamic a map can be, in that now we have seen so many instances of maps that are online or are computer created. They don't get printed, and the fact that they don't get printed makes them alive because you can change them anytime. When a system of representation starts to be so dynamic, it also can capture desires, and it also can capture scenarios that are not there yet. It becomes a tool for imagining the future, as well as representing the past.
We don't use the term consultation so much, because since Tony Blair and New Labour has come to power, it has become like a trend, and a trend spreading, I think, through Europe. But it's really, in many ways, tokenism, I feel. So we felt like implementing a truly participatory project through consultation it has been failing. So we've let go of it in a way.
Well, there's often misunderstanding of what participation is, and people think that consultation is participation, and I kind of disagree with that. Consultation is not real participation. Consultation is harvesting information.
Consultation is a very movable feast, and it can be very tokenistic, or it can at the other end of the continuum, can result in a very participative way of working.
When you create a public space, for example, there is most of the time it's through the different process that's set up in shaping the public space. It's always very top down, or the authority is given over to experts and consultants. But if you want from the very beginning the making of that space to be a communal discourse and experience, you have to find ways to give ownership to the people who want to take ownership. So you have to open it up. And part of that is that you become authors together. So you kind of flatten the hierarchy where you can to co-produce it together and co-author it.
So that's different from doing a survey, for example, where you might go door to door with a questionnaire and ask questions and get information. That's perfectly legitimate, and you can produce maps that way too. But the way that I conceive of cultural mapping, and I think that's coming from an anthropological background, is that it is a way in which you can make the people living in the spaces that you're interested in, you can make them collaborators and partners, co-producers of information and knowledge, rather than it being a one-way street by specialists. So it's a collaborative process.
There are instances of culture mapping where the process is more important than the outcome. There are instances where how you get there is more important than where you get. And those are the instances where you want to pursue this identity effect, where you want to engage the community.
It can be a way of actually creating a sense of community. I think one of the key terms actually when we talk about community and cultural mapping is that we all think what we know what we mean when we use the term community, and we use the term very lightly. But when it comes down to it, it's very unclear what actually constitutes a community, or even whether a community exists. And so one of the values, as far as I'm concerned, of cultural mapping is that it can be one of the ways in which community comes together and realises itself, starts to emerge and to value itself and to value the members of that community.
In other instances, it's really more important what you get in the end, because you need that for something else. And so in that case, maybe the community engagement could be a little less or less significant, because what you want is a set of data that maybe becomes an input for another process. So I think we have to remember that culture mapping is a very promising technique, very interesting, and I think yet to be developed. And it's both promising as a standalone methodology, where again, the process in itself is an end. But also, it's very promising as an activity within a broader project.